Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the day 4 of our free week in software quality assurance testing. Let's continue this exciting learning process together. Yesterday, we looked into a language called SQL, Structured Query Language. We learned what the database is and where the data is kept. We also learned how to create select statements to retrieve data from the database. We basically learned how to speak the SQL language yesterday. We also learned how to filter our records, the result set that we're receiving after our select statements. We also learned how to order the results. Apart from that, we made some progress in the code challenges, such as looking for the highest salary from the list of employees, or the second highest salary, or another frequently asked interview question, how to find the duplicate records in the database table. So we covered all of that, and that was an interesting and hopefully useful information to both for those who are new to QA and also for those who are out there in the job market. So today we will continue our learning process, but our focus is going to be into Python. Python is a programming language that has become very popular in recent years. It is used in actual application development, but also in testing. It is also used in artificial intelligence and also used by researchers and business analysts and data analysts in many different ways. You can think of Python as a knowledge that will be widely accepted in most of the universities, colleges, and even schools. So my personal opinion is that Python eventually is going to be like a math. Like knowing Python will be like knowing math, at least basics of Python. So as you are learning Python, this is going to be useful for you as a QA tester and as just someone who's living in this world of digitalization, pretty much. So let's take a look at. I took this graph right here, right before the class, just to show you how Python has been gaining popularity. As you can see right here, this line, this blue line here, is the trend of Python's rating or popularity across the years. So you can see that from 2018, it started gaining popularity, and currently it is the #1 language out there. And you can look at Java here. Java has been big, and still some of the companies still requiring Java knowledge in test automation, but the industry is slowly shifting. As you can see, Java is decreasing. Popularity of Java is decreasing, and Python is pretty much replacing most of the other languages, and you can see that here as well, Python being the #1 language currently. So let's look into this particular language that's gaining popularity. And the first thing to understand, to keep in mind whenever you're learning a programming language, is that it is like learning a foreign language. Like, let's say you're learning Italian. So whenever you're learning Italian or any other foreign language, the teacher always recommends you to practice more, right? To speak more, even if you're making a mistake. So you shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes, because you will be making mistakes, right? Any beginner makes mistakes, and in fact, you will learn from the error messages that you get whenever you make a mistake. Right. So the first important concept or the basic concept that you're going to learn in any programming language is how to write hello world to the terminal. I'll talk about terminal in a minute. So this is the first line of code that you'll learn in any programming language, printing hello world to the terminal. So let's open our code editor and then see how we can do this. I'll send you the link for the code editor as well if you want to practice along now or in the future. I'll just put this here into the chat. So this code editor is a web-based code editor, but in the actual working environment and also during the bootcamp, you will be using a tool called Visual Studio Code. I will briefly show that tool to you as well. So let's start typing our first line of code. Print, and we are writing hello world. So we could make it a bit more organized by putting a comma here, and then we click our run button, and you can see on the right hand side we got the message hello world. So what you see on the left hand side where I was typing print hello world is this is your editor side, right? This is your code editor pretty much. And on the right hand side what you have is a terminal. So what is a terminal? Terminal is a command line interface. So interfaces are usually a graphical user interface and command line interface. So graphical user interface is where you have buttons and where you can click and then drag and drop and so on. But in old times, when the computer was initially created, there were no graphical user interface, right? The only thing there the programmers or the users had to interact with was the command line. And I can show you an example here. This, for example, is a command line. It's called as a command prompt in Windows, and if you have a Mac, it should be a terminal, right? So you can pretty much perform the same actions here as well. So as you can see, I just launched the Python terminal within my command prompt, and I could type in hello world pretty much here as well, and then it would return the hello world text back to me. Okay, so this is one example of a terminal, pretty much. Now, speaking of making mistakes, right? Speaking of making mistakes, let's go back to our slide on this one for a second. Let's go to the next slide. Errors, right? So you will be making mistakes, right? In fact, mistake is the best way of learning the programming language. The interesting thing is that for every error that you make in Python, there is a specific name for the errors, right? So there are different classifications or types of errors that you could run into whenever you're making, you're creating your code, and then you accidentally make a mistake. And as you go through the bootcamp, you will be familiar with every type of error that comes out there, and you will know exactly what the issue is with your code. But there are also ways of handling the error messages. There are also ways of handling the error messages, and that will also be covered as part of the bootcamp. So let's take a look at some of the error messages that you could potentially see. If we go back to our terminal or code editor, and then what if I forget this parenthesis and then start to execute my code. As you can see, I'm getting a syntax error, right? Syntax error, unexpected, end of file while parsing. So this is one mistake that I could make. And another mistake that that is frequently made is losing or missing the quotes, right? As you can see, this is a text, and I'll explain what the string is in the next slide. So if you're not putting the quote at the end of the string or at the end of the text, as you can see, we started with a single quote, and if I didn't put the quote, and you're going to get another error message here again, right? What if I made a typo in the function name print? Instead of print, I lost the letter I along the way, and then this is now a name error, right? So this, as you can see, it says name print is not defined. So pretty much Python is telling you, I'm not sure what you are trying to perform because I'm not aware of this particular function. I know what print is, but I don't know what prnt is. So last lesson, I think I mentioned that we could include the language-based chat, OpenAI, artificial intelligence chat during the lesson is something that I want to take a look into as well, if it is possible, because this particular OpenAI artificial intelligence chat is the availability of this chat is limited, but let's see if we can actually interact. So if I go ahead and say hello world, but I'm going to forget my parentheses. If I go ahead and hit enter, look what it says, right? So it looks like you have a syntax error in your code, and the error is caused because you are missing a parenthesis at the end of your print statement. So pretty much, this is a very handy, I would say, a source of information that would be helpful during your learning process and also in the future as an IT professional, where you can quickly get feedback on potential mistakes in your code. And not only that, it's capable of generating blocks of code for you, pretty much based on your request, right? So let's go back. Let's go back and then correct our mistake right there, right? So it is printing. Now this time we're going to go back to our slide and then learn what the strings are. Okay, here we go. So what is a string? What strings are? Strings are basically text. Okay, so string is a text surrounded by quotes. So whenever you're typing any line of code, you are dealing with different data types. We talked about data yesterday, how data is stored in databases, in tables. But then again, there are different types of data, right? So there are texts and there are numbers. Numbers can be classified into different types, such as integers, or it can be decimal point numbers and so on. But what you're looking at right now is a very simple data type, which is text. And we usually refer to as strings in Python. It is referred to as strings because it's as if you take a bunch of characters and then put it and then hang it or connect them together using a string, pretty much. The interesting thing about strings in Python is that you can surround them by single quotes or double quotes. Okay, either single quotes or double quotes. So when I was typing right here, hello world, right, I use single quotes. And this hello world, by the way, is a string. It's a text. But the guideline is that if you start with a single quote, make sure you end it with a single quote. If you start with double quote, make sure you are consistent in your code, right? But if I mess up the consistency, you can see that I'm going to get this error message. And we could check the same thing here and then put it in our AI and then see if it will catch it as well. As you can see, there's another syntax error. You have used double quote instead of single quote to end the string. Here's the correct code. Okay. All right, let's go back. Now, now that we looked into the strings, we can move on to integers. Now, you might ask a question like, okay, so what is the purpose of having the single quotes and double quotes? Why not just having just only single quotes or only double quotes? The reason is that sometimes specific words or sentences might contain quotes in it, right? So let's say you want to print, let's actually correct this, a sentence such as, I'm going to school, something like that, right? So as you can see, this is successfully printing and with no issues. And I have the single quote here just because I have surrounded the whole string with the double quotes. But what would happen if I would put single quotes, right? And the Python would be confused because the Python interpreter would think that you started your string here and then ended right after the first character, and then the rest of it wouldn't be a complete string. So therefore, it would just throw an error. So that's the purpose of having double quotes and single quotes, so that you can sort of combine them whenever there is a need to do so. Okay. Let's move on. The next data type that you need to learn is the integers. It's also very, very basic data type that you will be dealing with a lot. Those are integers. And as you know from math, integers are just whole numbers. So we have negative integers, we have positive, and we also have 0 in the middle. So let's see how Python can handle the integers. So pretty much you can print any integer directly. So we can just print 1000. You could also perform mathematical operations while you're printing the information to the terminal, right? You can perform mathematical operations such as division or multiplication, and so on. Pretty much, it would do the math just like a calculator, pretty much. Okay, but there's also one interesting operator that is called as a modulo operator. So what is a modulo operator? Modulo operator is, you will see that it looks like a percentage. It is actually a percentage sign, and the purpose of modulo operator is that it will give you the remainder. Probably you remember from math, if you divide 10 by 3, what is the remainder? The remainder is 1, right? And I'll tell you in a little bit that why this modulo operator is also important, and also, in what kind of code challenges this comes up during the interviews. So modulo operator returns the remainder. So here's the another let me just put 15 by 4. We could do it 15 by 4. Now who can tell me what the result is going to be? 15, and then we'll put the modulo operator by 4. Pretty much 15 divided by 4, and what would be a remainder, and what would this particular statement return? All right, so we're getting numbers 3. Okay, let's go ahead and print, and as you can see, yes, it is returning 3. Now, one important thing to learn here is commenting the lines of code. What if I don't want to execute all of those lines of code, and I want to execute only the last line of code in Python? So I could simply select all of them, and then in your keyboard, Control /. So Control / is a shortcut to comment out your lines of code, so that Python will ignore them pretty much while executing your code. So now if I run, it only executes the last line of code. Okay, so those lines of code are commented out, or basically ignored by Python. And you could do it manually yourself as well, just putting a hashtag sign or symbol right before the line of code. Okay, but the shortcut here, or pretty much in any programming language or the tool in any code editor, is a Control /. So it's like a toggle, on and off, pretty much. Okay. All right. Now let's go back and then learn the next important concept, which is called a variable. So what is a variable? Variable is like a container to keep information. Okay, so far we've been using hello world string or 1,000 number 1,000 and digits such as 1 or 2 or 3 directly in the code. So we were not really saving it into any container. But most of the time, whenever you're writing a code, you will be creating variables. You will be saving information into your variable, and then so that you can reuse it, right? The purpose in programming is always to be more efficient, so that you don't have to repeat yourself, right? There's a specific guideline called as a dry coding, or do not repeat yourself, right? That's what dry in programming stands for. As you can see right here, this name is a variable, and then it's made equal to a string of a value of John, right? So next time, if I refer to name, the Python will know that the name is equal to John. That name contains the John, pretty much. Okay? Or let's say a GPA score is made equal to 4. So next time, if I refer to GPA, and the Python will know which value to pull out from its memory. So let's go ahead and see how it plays out in real life. So previously we were typing in hello world directly, right? So we just said hello world, and then it worked out perfectly fine for us. But what if we're going to take this hello world and then save it into a message. Save it into a message. And then instead of printing hello world, we're going to print the message. Okay. And the result is going to be pretty much the same outcome, right? So you have the same outcome because now the message is like a container. So inside that container, we have this string saved. And now we're printing that message, but we're referring to it using the name of the variable. Okay. Now, what happens if I comment out the first line? Now, who can tell me what happens if I comment out the first line and then try to run my program? What kind of error message am I going to get? Or is it going to run as is? Any ideas? So I commented out the line 1, and I will go ahead. Error message, syntax error. All right. So another. So let's ask our AI what they think is gonna happen. So looks like you're trying to print variable message, but seems like the variable has not been defined yet. So you basically didn't give me that that variable yet, but you're trying to use it, right? You didn't give it to me yet, but you're trying to use it. There we go. Actually, they used the same message that we were trying to use, and we could actually ask what type of error message would I receive from this Python code, and then give and then see what it says. Beforehand, you would receive a name error with the following message. See that? Not the syntax error, but a name error, because the message is not defined. And we can actually check. I'll go ahead and run, and you can see that it says name error. So we received name error. So why is it a name error? Why not a syntax error? Because it's not a syntax issue. If I was losing this particular parenthesis at the end, that would be syntax. If I was missing a quotation marks, that would be a syntax. But if you're using a specific name of the variable, but that variable was never defined, right? It was defined, but then we cleared that out from the code, basically commented out. Now the Python doesn't know what the message is, and this is when it throws a name error, right? It's a name error. Whenever you see the name error, Python is trying to tell you, I don't know what this variable is. I don't have it in my memory, in my library. So you probably made a typo there, or you never defined it, right? Just like, let's say, instead of putting message, it's very common that you could just make a typo. And then, we just swapped just one letter from E to A, and then you would get the same outcome here. Basically, name massage is not defined, right? Okay, let's correct our code and just go back. Now, so that will be hello world, and we could also say age equals to 25. And then we could include something like hello message, and then we could also put just the age. You can see that you could actually include the variables as a comma separated, and then you would actually go ahead and print. Now this doesn't make much sense, but if you want to make it more useful, there's a way of actually printing information in a more informational way. It was something that we're going to see in a minute as well. All right, so with all that being said so far, let's learn. Let's go back to our slides. So what do we have next here? We have the conditional statements. All right, so there's a question. I thought after print, we always have to use semicolon. Right. See that? That's the confusion that many people have whenever they come from programming languages such as Java or JavaScript. You have the semicolon and you have the curly braces, and that is actually some of the symbols that make the code unnecessarily more complex, in my opinion. And Python is known to be beginner friendly and at the same time very powerful. It has so many different libraries that are being used for data analytics, and those libraries include pandas, something that we will cover. I talked about it briefly. It has libraries to automate the API process, API testing process, and so on. So, but at the same time, it is very, very simple. It is very, very simple. So no semicolons, no curly braces, but there is specific syntax that you need to follow in Python that's called indentation, and I'll show you what that means in a minute. So far we have learned what strings are and also what integer is, right? And we also learn how to print them to the terminal. But there are also data types that contains not only one value but several values at the same time. And those are there are different such data types, but we're going to learn only one of them, which is called as list. So let's imagine we have a list of friends. We have a list of friends. And the syntax is that you're going to use hard brackets. And our friends are Anna, and then we have Jane, and then we have John, right? So we have 3 friends. We have 3 friends. As you can see, the friends here is still a variable. It is a variable, but that variable contains not only just one value, but collection of values, but list of values. List of values. Now, now what if I wanted to say hello to all of the friends at the same time, right? Separately to each of them, basically, right? How could I do that? And this can be achieved by a syntax or statement called as loops. So you will learn loops. At the beginning, it might look a bit complicated or complex, but you will get the hang of it by practice. So the syntax here is English-like. It sounds like English. For friend in friends, right? See that? For each friend in the list of friends, basically, that's what we're trying to say. For each of my friend in the list of my friends, see the difference here? This is singular and this is plural, because this right here is the list, but this friend here stands for each item in the list. Now we're going to go ahead and print hello. But now, for now, we're just printing hello. We're not printing their names yet, but we'll do that in a minute. Now, as you can see, we printed hello 3 times. Why did that happen? Why did we print hello 3 times? Because we have 3 friends in our list of friends, right? For each of them, this is what we were requesting from Python, pretty much. For a friend in friends, print hello. But what if I wanted to make that message more individual and then say their names as well, right? This can be done. And it is called as a F string instead of just a string, F string. Also, there's another more complicated terminology here, which you could refer to as a string interpolation. String interpolation, don't bother yourself too much with it. It's just if you are out there looking for a job or going through the interviews, you might face this kind of interview question, whether there's string interpolation in Python. And this could be one example that you could use to explain what that is. So we're pretty much using a variable inside the string right here, right? But right before that, we have to use the F. So, and then this will treat this value as a variable pretty much. Now, if I run my code, as you can see, for each of my friends individually, I'm saying hello, right? You see that? This is called as looping. So if I were to add another person here, like Mike, and rerun my code, right? Now the code is efficient. So I didn't really have to write hello, Anna, hello, Jane, and John, and Mike 4 times. I only wrote 2 lines of code, and that 2 lines of code is pretty much looping through the list, each item in the list, and then performing specific actions. Right? So this is where the power of loops come into picture in programming language, and you will be learning loops through practice. And so right now is a good moment to explain you what the indentation is. First of all, pay attention that there's colon right after this this line, or whenever we end the first line of our loop and then try to go to the body of the loop, right? This line is called as the body of our loop. Now, did you notice that this is actually indented? Now, what if I go ahead and then remove this indentation and go put it back to at the end or at the beginning of the line, right? And then if I go ahead and try to run, I get an indentation error, right? So if we read expected an indented block, this is probably the most important requirement from Python, which at the same time makes it very simple. But then again, this is a replacement for all those semicolons or the curly braces that you might face in other programming language. That's going to make it quite complicated actually, right? So it's less readable, but this is more readable, easily coded. All you have to do is put an indentation, and you don't even have to do it yourself. So code editor will do it for you. So whenever you use this colon and then hit enter, it's going to put the indentation automatically for you. Okay, so that's the idea pretty much. Now there's another type of loop other than the for loop. Okay, so what we just saw here was a for loop, and there's another type of for loop that's called as a while loop. While loop, I'll show you how the while loop works. Let's actually clean this up. Now, before we go to the while loop, let's learn one additional function. Instead of the print, there's an input function. Input function takes information from the user. Instead of printing the information to the console, it takes information from the user. So let's say I will just put a question here: how old are you? And then if I run, as you can see, it's putting a question to the terminal, and then I can actually type in the answer here, for example, 25, and then hit enter. And this is like an interactive program that you are creating pretty much. It takes a value from the user, and then it returns the value back to the program. So now that we know the input function, let's go ahead and use a while loop here. And with the while loop, question that we're going to ask is, let's imagine you are creating a program that has to check for the red light, and then if it's still red, then keep your foot on the brake. If it's, until the red light stops and then moves on to the green light, that's when you drive, pretty much, right? So the question here is going to be, is it still red light, right? Is it still red light? And if the answer is yes, let's move this, decrease it a little bit. If the answer is yes, then the command or the instruction is going to be keep your foot on the brake. But then if it's not yes, right, if it's no longer the red light, then we could pretty much drive, right? So drive when it is safe to do so. Okay, now let's check our program and let's see how it works. So is it still red light? So if I say, and the answer is yes, keep your foot on the brake, and then it comes back and asks you the same question again. You see that? This is the difference between the for loop and then the while loop. For loop was, the purpose of the for loop pretty much was to repeat the program as many times as it was in the list, or as specific number of times. Basically, we knew exactly whether it would print hello 4 times or 3 times, because it was as many times as it was in the list or some collection. But the while loop is more flexible. So while loop is, it will run as many times as it is necessary, right? It's more dynamic. So if I keep saying yes, it will just keep coming back with a question. Okay, so keep your foot on the brake. It will just say, as long as it's red, keep your foot on the brake. But what if I say no? Is it still red light? No, it's not red light. So, and the program ends and it says drive when it is safe to do so. Now the program ended. See? So that's idea. That's a general idea behind the loops in Python, right? It's a very simplified way, that the one that you are looking at right now, pretty much. Now let's try to create another program, but this time with conditional statements, and we'll talk about conditional statements. Now we have a specific slide for conditional statements here. Most of the logic in any programming language or in any software is created using the conditional statements, and it's also referred to as an algorithm, right? Algorithm. So which means there is a decision making happening all the time within the software. So whenever you want to log into the software, right, into, let's say, into Facebook or into any program that requires authentication, you put in your username and password, and what happens behind the scenes is that there is this if statement that's implemented. And the statement sounds like, if we translate into simple English, if the user's username and password combination matches with what we have in the database, then let the person in, let the user in. Otherwise, reject. Otherwise, say no, username doesn't match, or you have a blank username, and so on, right? So how's that all that logical thinking of the program, of the software, is implemented behind the scenes? So that logical decision-making flow is implemented using conditional statements, and it's also pretty much English-like syntax. It's called as an if statement, if-else statement, right? If statement and if-else statement, as you can see this particular example here, if it's snowing, then wear your boots. If it's not snowing, right, then wear your sneakers. If it's snowing or if it's not snowing, so this is how the program will actually go ahead and make a decision. Let's create this particular program here. So snowing, right? Snowing, and I made it equal to a value that is true. That's a very interesting data type. That's a third data type that you're going to learn today. It's referred to as Boolean. It's referred to as Boolean. Boolean data type can be either true or false. Either true or false. Okay. So what we are saying here is that, just clear this up. Snowing, true. Yes. Yes, it is snowing. And now we're going to start typing our code here using conditional statements. If snowing, then wear boots. Else, wear sneakers. Okay. Now if I go ahead and run my code, as you can see, it says wear boots, because if snowing, because the snowing is true, right? It is snowing. Now, if I say false, which means it's not snowing, right? And then if I go ahead and run the same line of code, as you can see that it returns wear your sneakers. Okay, makes sense. Now, there is a, usually, beginners, they would go ahead and type something like this. If snowing equals to true, that also makes sense, but really it's unnecessary. So you could simply say if it's snowing, and it would still work. So this is the idea behind the if-else statement or conditional statements. So let's create another conditional statement so that we kind of learn it even better. So let's say you have a score, and your score, let's get this, you know what, for now we're just going to put the score as 80. So there's a score 80, and if the score is more than or equal to 70, then we'll say excellent. Okay, now elif, if the score is more or equal to 60, we're going to say good. But then else, if the score is pretty much below 60, then we can say could do better. Okay, now if I go ahead and run, here we go. We got some error messages right there. So as you can see, error message is the Python interpreter gives you a very useful information about where the error is in your code. As you can see, it is specifically pointing to the place where I put the call on, and it should not be there. So as you can see, 80 is more than or equal to 70. That's why it returned Excellent. Now, what if I were to give 65? As you can see, it would say good, right? Because now this particular condition is not true. Score is not more than or equal to 70, but it is more than 60. What if we put that as a 59? Who can tell me what are we going to get if I put a 59? For the 59, what's the outcome that we're going to get right here from this program? Could do better, right? We're going to get could do better from the 59. Yes, yes. Thank you. Everybody's doing great. All right. So you see, most of the defects that programmers make is around the boundaries. If the requirement was written as saying it should be more than or more than an equal, and programmers could actually type it as more than 70. They could do that, right? So because they might easily forget more than or equal, or same thing here. If it's more than 60 or equal to 60, there's a slight difference here, right? If the programmer will forget to put more than or equal to right at the boundary, this is where the bug would actually occur. So let's say if this is a particular program, and then your expectation is that it has to be more than and equal to 60, but then programmers typed it as a more than 60, and then you are checking the boundaries, and this is why it's important to check the boundaries, right? It's called as a boundary value analysis. Boundary value analysis. So the approach in boundary value analysis is that you look at the requirement document, and then if you see that they are mentioning the boundary of 60, then it's better to test it with 60, 59, and 61. So right around the boundaries, this is where you have a high probability or high chance of catching the bug, and there's a high chance that developers fell asleep or developers made some mistake, pretty much. Okay. Is there a way that you could enter the number on the input? I meant yes. That's something that we can do right now. So what if instead of just hard coding the 60 right here, right? Let's just actually correct this. Hard coding the 60 or 70, we could make this program a bit more interactive. So we could make the program a bit more interactive, and this way we're going to put input and say, please enter your score. Okay, please enter your score. Now the person is going to enter their score, and the program is supposed to evaluate. But now right here we're gonna see another very interesting concept called as a data type conversion or type error. So please enter your score. So if I go ahead and type in 100, let me type in 100. What do you think I'm going to get if I hit enter right now? What do you think I'm going to get? Okay. Excellent, right? So that's what you would normally expect. That you think that I'm going to get it. Excellent. So, but if I go ahead and hit enter, as you can see, I got a very detailed error message. Let's read the error message. So it says type error greater than or equal sign or operator not supported between str, which stands for string, and integer. So this kind of comparison is not supported. It's not supported between the string and integer. But you can think, but we entered an integer, right? The 100 is an integer. How come it thinks that it's a string? The thing is that you typed in an integer. Yes, it is an integer, but this particular built-in function input, we're using built-in function input, and that function returns, or basically it's taking information and giving back, right? That's what returns means. It returns a string. It returns a string no matter whatever you enter. Okay, so you're entering an integer, it's going to return you a string. So to solve this kind of issue, we can go ahead and actually convert our score into an integer. Right before that, we can convert it into an integer, and there is another built-in function called int that's going to take the string and then turn it into an integer, pretty much. Now, if we go ahead and rerun, you're going to get an excellent and no error messages. Okay, makes sense? We could put the integer right here as well. Okay, right here. This would be another, but it looks a bit more complex and complicated for this exercise. So let's keep it in a separate line here so that it's more readable. Okay, as you can see, we accept the string, but then we turn that into an integer. Now let's run our program again and then check, what if I got 30? Could do better. Or 59 could do better. Let's check the 60. That's good. All right. And 71, the boundary, excellent. We could also check the 69 right here. It's good. And the 70 is still excellent. So pretty much this is how the conditional statements work. Okay, so this is now, speaking of the data types, if you're in any moment, if you're confused, or if you don't know which data type the value belongs to, there is a built-in function called type. Now, and you can use it right here, pretty much directly in the terminal. Let's say hello, right? I want to check which data type this value belongs to, and then it's going to return. As you can see, it says class str, so it means data type of string, pretty much, right? So understanding classes is a bit early for beginner level. So there are classes and there are objects, and the classes are part of object-oriented programming that is also taught as part of the bootcamp. And there are specific test automation frameworks that are completely based on object-oriented programming, such as page object model. But that's something that's you're gonna learn eventually. But for now, just focus on this particular function that's called as type, and this is a very helpful function that can tell you to which data type a value belongs to. As you can see, 1000 is an integer, right? And then we can check the true here. Now, let's see if you were paying attention or if you're aware of this. Type true, what do you think if this returns? If I say type true, what do you think this is going to return? Anyone? Okay, Boolean, excellent. That's right. So as you can see, it says class of bool, right? So type true is going to return class of bool, so it means it's Boolean. Now there are other data types, of course, such as if I say 10.5, then as you can see, it's not integer, it's a float. It's not an integer, it's a float. And so on, basically, right? We're not going to go any further. So there are many data types out there. Right. One of the data type that we could actually check is something that we checked earlier. We know that collection of values within the hard brackets is what? It's a list, right? That's something that you also learned today. So you can see that this is specifically mentioned as a list. This is the data type that we have. Now let's see another interesting concept that's called as functions. So what functions are, but we'll cover it briefly. Mostly for those who are going through the interviews and who might expect code challenges. Sometimes you are asked a question such as create a function that's going to take an input and determine if it is odd or even number, right? If it's an even number, then print even, or if it's odd number, then print odd, pretty much, right? So writing a function is very easy. There's a syntax, and the syntax starts with def, and then def stands for define, pretty much, right? So, and we will give a name per function, odd or even. Our function will take some number, some sort of number, okay? So any number. So it's going to be dynamic. So it's going to accept the number, and then it will return some sort of value. We're actually going to keep it simple and print, right? So now, if number, right now we're writing a conditional statement. If number with the modulo operator, when we divide the number by 2, if the remainder is 0, then print that it is even. Makes sense? Does that make sense? Because think of it that way. So let's take 4. 4 divided by 2, is there any remainder? There's no remainder, right? So, or you are dividing 6 by 2, there's no remainder. 100 by 2, there is no remainder. But if you divide any odd number by 2, there's always a remainder, correct? There's always a remainder. So this is where the modulo operator comes into picture, and it's used efficiently in this kind of code challenges. So as you can see now, we can go ahead and use our function odd, even, and then we can give 100. And then if we run, as you can see, it says even. But if we change the 100 to 101, it's going to print odd. Okay, so this was a very basic code challenge, pretty much. Code challenges get more complicated, such as they might ask you to reverse a string. Now, reversing a string, luckily in Python is very easy. And let's say we have a message, and we're gonna say that, or let's keep it simple in the word, right? Halloween, and you want to reverse that word, Halloween, and the approach here is that you're gonna write something like this. It's called slicing with a -1 step. Now it's a bit more advanced and complex topics as when you're just starting, so don't get overwhelmed with this, because we're just showing it as an additional tip or suggestion for those who are already learning and who are going through the interviews as well. So just to make it more useful to the larger audience. As you can see, the word now just got reversed, right? So that's one quick way of actually reversing a string. Now, if you were doing it in Java, you probably would write like 10 lines of code, I'm pretty sure. So in this way, Python is more powerful. But then again, there are another level or more complicated way of asking you code challenges, such as reverse it, but just to reverse the order of words in the sentence. So let's say dog chased boy, right? So dog chased boy. So I know it doesn't sound like very correct, not so much of a natural, but the purpose here is that we need to reverse that sentence in a way so that it's going to be boy chased the dog. All right, boy chased the dog. Now, all right, so this probably we might have to open up a new interpreter, since it is complaining a little bit. Okay, so now further, the way to do this is that first we're going to create we're going to create a list. As you can see, I will show you how this actually works. So we're going to split this sentence into words. Okay, you see, so this is the first step. You're splitting the sentence into words, and the next step would be, after you split it, then you're going to go ahead and reverse the order. Now, as you can see, it says boy chased dog. We just reverse the order. But then the next step would be to join it as a sentence now. Now we have to make a string out of a list. Okay, now we have to make a string out of a list, and this can be achieved by a specific function or a method called join. Now, as you can see, we successfully pretty much reversed the sentence. Not in a way that the letters are reversed, but only the words are reversed. Okay, so instead of dog chased boy, we have a boy chased dog, right? So rewatch the session and certainly practice, and it's going to be useful if you are in the job market and going through the code challenges as an automation tester, for example.